Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Just want to quickly say, sometimes we can't turn the other cheek because it might get closer to home. Even though you might not think it affects you today, it might affect you tomorrow. Stand up for injustice, any wrongdoings, and you know how we do. Don't mention them Chazars. Welcome, welcome. Part 14. We're going to talk about a little bit in the beginning about how Palestine used to be, little documentary here, cut out a lot. It talked about, the different ports, and we saw a little bit in the last video how they had a whole train station going all to all different countries. They were very prosperous. They had a lot of trade going on in the Mediterranean Sea, and there was a whole story before 1948. Welcome, thank you.
Palestinian society showed every sign of rising to the challenges of the 20th century. But always lurking beneath the surface was the promise that the British had made to the Zionist movement to support the founding of a homeland for the Jewish people, and this would soon threaten not just the development, but the very existence of Palestine itself. 100 years ago, Palestine was a very different place compared with today. It was under British control or mandate, and there were those who suggested it was just an empty land. But in fact, cities like Jerusalem had an established commercial sector, transport networks, and an emerging cultural life. They began to attract Arab intellectuals, writers, and artists, and interest grew in developing new media like cinema and filmmaking. People were also getting interested in sport and hosting international events and competitions. The municipality of Jaffa discussed a plan to host an Arab Olympic event, while Palestinian athletes won international championships. Alongside commerce and culture, an active political movement developed. During the Ottoman era, Palestine had representatives in the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house of the Ottoman Parliament. But at the start of the British Mandate, the Palestinian national movement began to take shape in Jerusalem. It called for the independence of Palestine. The first Arab-Palestinian Congress was organized by local Muslim and Christian groups in 1919. Its 30 attendees denounced the British mandate and called for their different groups to unify under one association.
لأنه صار في حالة اقتصادية جيدة مريحة للناس اللي بتسمح إنك تبني أشياء أكبر بكتير من احتياجاتك الأساسية.
في عام 1931 جرى في مدينة القدس مؤتمر لم يجري مثله حقيقة في القرن العشرين حتى، المؤتمر الإسلامي العام. وجاء هذا المؤتمر أكثر من 150 عضواً من حوالي كل 24-25 بلداً عربياً وإسلامياً في العالم. لمدة 10 أيام استمر المؤتمر في مدينة القدس. كان في لجان متعددة، كان في قرارات متعددة. من أهم القرارات السياسية أنه قيل أن المؤتمر قد يخاف أو يخشى من الانتداب فلا يتحدث عن الشؤون السياسية، بالعكس تحدث ووقف ضد الاستعمار، ضد الاستعمار الفرنسي في المغرب، ضد الطليان وفضائحهم كانت في الجبل الأخضر وفي ليبيا، كانت تسمى طرابلس وبرقة في ذلك الوقت، وأيضا ضد الفرنسيين في لبنان وسوريا، وضد البريطانيين، ضد الإنجليز أنفسهم. كانت قرارات متعددة، وبالنسبة إلى فلسطين بالذات من أهمها إنماء الثقافة، إنشاء جامعة المسجد الأقصى، للأسف لأسباب كثيرة لم تنجح فيما بعد.
But any decisions taken by these congresses were increasingly overshadowed by a growing phenomenon in the 1920s and 30s: immigration. The Zionist movement had grown up in Europe in the late 19th century, lobbying for a homeland for the Jewish people. The pressure it put on the British government led to a major announcement in November 1917. The Balfour Declaration was named after the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour. It was a letter he sent to a leader of the British Jewish community which said that
His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which shall prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine.
the eventual impact of the Balfour Declaration was to encourage European Jews to immigrate to Palestine, but that impetus had not really built up by 1920. Things began to change, however, as the victorious Allied powers of Britain, France, Italy, and Japan discussed how to divide up the old Ottoman Empire. Britain was granted a mandate for Palestine at a conference in the northwest Italian city of San Remo in April 1920. This was approved by the League of Nations in July 1922, but there was a crucial contradiction within the mandate. Members of the Zionist movement, including the British politician Herbert Samuel, attended the San Remo conference, and the Balfour Declaration was incorporated into the British mandate. But the British also had a dual obligation to govern and conduct policy in Palestine on behalf of both Jews and Arabs. In reality, however, the San Remo conference tipped the balance significantly one way.
قبل 100 عام من اليوم، وتحديدا في عام 1920، بدأ الانتداب البريطاني بشكل رسمي بتعيين أول مندوب سامي بريطاني على فلسطين، وهو هربرت سامويل، وهو يهودي صهيوني متعاطف مع الأماني الصهيونية. وهذا كان أحد الأمور التي سهلت الطريق أمام الصهيونية لوضع أسسها الفعلية في السيطرة على الأرض وعلى المصالح الاقتصادية في فلسطين.
Herbert Samuel was one of the Zionist movement delegates at the San Remo conference. He was then appointed British High Commissioner for Palestine in July 1920, but before he took office, he visited the region. Some of his meetings were minuted and published in the press. The surviving records shed light on the tense relationship between Samuel and Palestinian leaders, as well as his attempts to persuade them to share land with Jewish immigrants.
I see a group of Jews in your country who can help you construct your land and teach you the economics in a good, harmless way.
Our country has enough qualified and willing people to properly invest in our land and elevate our state's affairs without the intervention of the Jews.
But if the Jews came to your country, they'd build the unplanted lands, which are an excess to your people's needs.
There are no unplanted lands in our country, except for some small areas that are unfit for agriculture. We will definitely have to plant and invest in them in the future because our people reproduce in big numbers, thank God.
Each one of us has an average of 7 children. We must prepare lands for them.
We have heard that you are one of the founding Zionist leaders.
I'm not one of the Zionists.
We know that you're one of the key Zionist leaders. You've organized their finances. Now that you've seen our situation and heard our wishes, you must have realized that our land doesn't fit other people and that we won't let the Zionists in as long as we live.
في العالم العربي في انتداب فرنسي أيضا وفي انتداب بريطاني أيضا في العراق وعلى الأردن، يعني ولو بشكل غير ظاهر تماما 100%. لكن في فلسطين اختلف الموضوع، لأن الشعب الفلسطيني أصبح يقارع الانتداب ويجب أن يقارع الصهيونية، وليس له أيضا القدرة وليس له الوقت الكافي أيضا للإنماء الزراعي كما كان يتمنى، وأيضا للإنماء الاقتصادي كما كان يتمنى. لكن كل هذا لا أقول توقف، لكن إلى حد ما تعثر.
The increasing tension between Arabs and Zionist Jews boiled over when they clashed in Jerusalem in August 1929 in what's known as the Burak Uprising.
Jewish immigration became the main plank of the British Mandate. Most East European Jews wanted to go to America or to Western Europe. In 1925, more Jews went to Palestine than to America because of restrictions on Jewish immigration. So, for example, by 1935, which was the peak of Jewish immigration during the Mandate, the immigration reached 65,000 in just 1 year.
What's more, the British Mandate allowed Jewish immigrants to become Palestinian citizens.
Palestinians were never consulted about these things, and again, it's to do with the overall strategy promoting the idea of a Jewish national home in Palestine from 1920 onwards. It was formalized in the Mandate, which came into force in 1923, and it granted Palestinian citizenship to Jewish immigrants, absolutely.
يعني هي عمليا أكثر أعطوا جنسية، هنا أقول باسبور فلسطيني كان يسمى. عشرات آلاف من المهاجرين المستوطنين اليهود اللي وصلوا بطرق غير شرعية، بمعنى أنه كانت السفن تنزل المهاجرين بمواقع مختلفة على ساحل البحر، وبالتالي تقوم الحركة الصهيونية بتخصيص فرق لجذبهم، وبتكون معاملاتهم صارت جاهزة من خلال موظفين يهود صهيونيين بيشتغلوا في الإدارات البريطانية. يعني خلينا نقول نوع من محسوبيات، نوع من معرفة مسبقة لدى الإنجليز إنه هذه الإجراءات عم بتتم، وبالتالي هذا أعطى الكثير من الجنسيات وجوازات السفر لليهود دون أي حق لهم في الحصول عليها.
قرنين وأكثر والحركة الصهيونية المسيحية غير اليهودية ابتدأت قبل الصهاينة اليهود بالادعاء أنه فلسطين لا يوجد فيها أحد، شراذم بدو، شراذم فلاحين، لا يوجد شعب ولا يوجد حضارة، لا يوجد زراعة، والإزاء والأخبار أنه لا يوجد شيء في فلسطين يستحق الذكر. هذا سبق حتى مولد هرزل هذا الكلام.
In December 1947, the British announced that their mandate for Palestine would end 5 months later. This led to increased violence by armed Zionist Jewish groups. On the 14th of May 1948, the day before the mandate ended, the head of the Jewish agency, David Ben-Gurion, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. The new state incorporated 78% of mandatory Palestine. Over 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes and became refugees in neighboring countries.
كانت محسوبة إن فلسطين ما كانت فاضية. هذا كلام أنا بسميه بالخرافة. فلسطين كان فيها شعب نشيط فعال منتج مفكر مبدع، ووضع البنية التحتية مش بس بحيفا، بيافا، بعكا، بصفد، بطبرية، ببيسان، بالناصرة، ببير السبع، باللد، بالرملة، بالقدس، بغيرها من المدن الفلسطينية. كل هذه المؤسسات التي وضعها الإنسان الفلسطيني وأسسها، كل العمران الذي شيده الإنسان الفلسطيني، الحركة الصهيونية عملت حسابها. في حال ما أنه بتنفذ عملية التطهير العرقي وطرد السكان، كل هذه المنشآت ستعود بالفائدة على المهاجرين المستوطنين اليهود الذين وصلوا إلى هذه البلاد من كل أصقاع الدنيا. أنا أعطيك على سبيل المثال، في عام 48-49 عندما تمت عمليات التطهير العرقي من المدن المركزية، مباشرة بدأت قوافل وأسراب وسفن وطائرات من المهاجرين اليهود من مختلف أصقاع الدنيا بالوصول إلى فلسطين، ومباشرة تم توطينهم في البيوت والمساكن الفلسطينية. يعني لو ما كان هذا محسوب حسابه من قبل، يمكن كان بتواجه الحركة الصهيونية صعوبات في هذه العشرات الآلاف من المهاجرين. أين سيتم توطينهم؟ يعني أخذوا مدارس كاملة، مباني كاملة موجودة في القرى وفي المدن، وتم تحويلها لخدمة المشروع الصهيوني.
Wow. All right. So quick summary. So you got millions of people just coming into a land where there was already millions of people, very prosperous people. When you start really doing the research, he's gonna talk about it a little bit, but there's a whole segment I cut out. I don't want to get copyright. We're just trying to discuss and promote, endorse the documentary. For discussion, we must discuss fair use. They were very prosperous people. Millions of people just came all of a sudden because of a favor that the British, so-called British, were doing for the Zionists, because the Zionists had bailed them out. Their banks had bailed them out and stuff. It's all politics, but and that was the British mandate, what they were talking about. And then the British mandate, once they took occupation of the Ottoman territories after the loss in World War I, which was also kind of orchestrated by the Hazars as well. This goes way back. We're gonna get into all that a little bit. We got into it in some of the parts before. If you haven't seen the whole series, check it out. But it's very clear as what I'm trying to say. It's trying to point out, what am I missing? Like a certain amount of people coming to another land, and then they say, you all got to move. As you guys heard, 700,000 Palestinians were moved from a specific location for the new settlers. Eastern European. All right, and we might go over part 1 today again at the end. I think as a little bonus, somebody was asking. Just remember the whole history. How did they get to over there in that region? So let's continue. And honor to all the people who, past and present, that have experienced this, what you call, I guess some will call apartheid system. And, a lot of stories, but here we go.
اللي صار بال48 بنحكاش. اللي صار بال48 بنحكاش. اللي صار بال48 بنحكاش. إيش ما أحكي كذب، وأنا بحكي اللي شفته، بحكيش اللي سمعته، بحكي اللي شفته. وأنا شفت كتير. 48 انت بتصدق انه يافا ما ضلش فيها 30 عيلة؟ يافا العزيزة في وطنها وهي الحمى وهي السكن.
المشروع الصهيوني هجر أهل البلد، يعني أهل البلد، وورث البيارات والمصانع والبيوت والسيارات وعفش الناس اللي بالبيوت والحدائق والأوراق والسينمات والمسارح والبنوك، كل شيء، المقابر، المقدسات، المساجد، الكنائس، كليتها، وحولها تحت حكمه وسيطرته. رسم حدود من أول وجديد، وقرر أنه يجب أن يكون هناك انقطاع تام عن العالم العربي، وممنوع للناس يكون لها علاقة مع العالم العربي لأنه أعلنها كدولة حدود.
كله مخطط له، مخطط لعملية السرقة، مخطط لعملية شرعنة السرقة. إنه كل من ترك البيت لأي سبب كان، غاب عنه، يفقد بيته، يفقد أرضه، يفقد مصلحته. طيب ما هو ما دام الواحد الطبيعة البشرية بخاف من القصف، بخاف من العمليات التفجيرية والإجرامية والإرهابية، حقه أن يحمي نفسه وأن يخرج إلى مكان آخر، وحقه بالتالي أن يعود إلى بيته، أن يعود إلى مصلحته، أن يعود إلى شركته. فإسرائيل هي الدولة الغريبة العجيبة في العالم اللي بتطرد وبتمنع أنه يرجع ويأخذ حقه. حتى أولئك اللي هربوا من المدينة إلى أي قرية مجاورة بهدف الاحتماء فقط، يعني حتى لو كيلومتر واحد، حتى لو كيلومتر واحد. أنا أعطيك مثال، أهالي صفوري قرب الناصرة نتيجة للقصف والعمليات العسكرية جزء منهم لجأ إلى الناصرة. هذا حق إنساني أن يلجأ الإنسان إلى مكان يحميه. لم يتمكنوا من العودة حتى يومنا هذا إلى بيوتهم. لذلك السرقة هي ليست فقط سرقة، هي سرقة وشرعنتها قانونيا. إذا أصبحت السرقة مزدوجة.
تعرف أبوي كيف مات بال65؟ أجي يخلع البيارات، لما شاف التراكتور بيخلع بالشجر قعد يعيط زي الولد الصغير وقلب. كان معدي 90 سنة، قلب وديناه على السبيطار مات، فقع. شجر هو زارعه الله بيعلم من أنهي سنة. لما خلعوه أخذوا الأرض ما حسش، ولا أبا أخذوا الأرض، وقال لا بس الشجر موجود. لما أجوا يخلعوا الشجر انجن. هيك صار. خلاص تعبت، كفي يا عم، بكفي.
So yeah, he remembers his dad. You know, he's from Jaffa. It was a very prosperous port in Gaza and all that. He remembered he was a kid before, you know, chasers came in town. So he's just, you know, it's very hard for him to talk about it. A lot of stuff, again, I cut out. He explained the whole lot, how prosperous it was, how, you know, everybody was pretty prosperous. Anyways, we're gonna continue here. I was gonna end it there, but we got a good crowd. We got a good crowd here. Let's go here real quick. Thanks for tuning in. Again, fair use.
Swedish diplomat Count Folke Bernadotte was appointed as UN mediator in Palestine. His mission was to seek a peaceful settlement. Count Bernadotte surveyed the devastated Palestinian villages and visited refugee camps in both Palestine and Jordan. In a report, he wrote, "It would be an offense against the principles of elementary justice if these innocent victims were denied the right to return to their homes." On September the 17th, 1948, the day following his UN report, the motorcade of Count Bernadotte was ambushed in Jerusalem. He was shot at point-blank range by members of the Jewish Stern Gang.
All decent people must have been horrified by the murder by Jewish terrorists of the two British sergeants, Mervyn Pace and Clifford Martin. Their funeral took place at the Ramleh Cemetery with full military honours. The two sergeants, kidnapped as hostages, were hanged as a reprisal, the sort of cruelty once commonly indulged in by the Nazis. Until the appalling situation in Palestine is cleared up, unspeakable outrages may well continue.
La base de la paz justa en la región comienza por la retirada total e incondicional de Israel de todos los territorios árabes ocupados. Y supone para el pueblo palestino la devolución de todos sus territorios ocupados y la recuperación de sus derechos nacionales inalienables, incluido el derecho del retorno a su patria, a la libre determinación y al establecimiento de un Estado independiente en Palestina, de conformidad con la resolución 3236 de la Asamblea General. Ello implica la ilegalidad y nulidad de las medidas adoptadas por Israel en los territorios palestinos y árabes ocupados, así como del establecimiento de colonias o asentamientos en tierras palestinas y en los demás territorios árabes, cuyo desmantelamiento inmediato es un requisito para la solución del problema. Como dije en mi discurso a la sexta cumbre, no somos fanáticos. El movimiento revolucionario se educó siempre en el odio a la discriminación racial y los pogromes de cualquier tipo. Y desde el fondo de nuestras almas repudiamos con todas nuestras fuerzas la despiadada persecución y el genocidio que en su tiempo desató el nazismo contra el pueblo hebreo. Pero no puedo recordar nada más parecido en nuestra historia contemporánea que el desalojo, persecución y genocidio que hoy realizan el imperialismo y el sionismo contra el pueblo palestino, despojados de sus tierras, expulsados de su propia patria, dispersados por el mundo, perseguidos y asesinados. Los heroicos palestinos constituyen un ejemplo impresionante de abnegación y patriotismo y son el símbolo vivo del crimen más grande de nuestra época.
It is boiling because we are seeing children, innocent children, blown to bits. Children who are getting the limbs amputated without pain, without anaesthetic because of the blockade. And I was in Palestine in 2015 with Operation Protective Edge, and I witnessed with my own eyes aid being prevented from getting into Gaza when Israel decided to, as they say, mow the lawn. And that's what they do. Every few years they go in and they bulldoze.
Do you think we has been pulverized slow to recognise the terror that has been inflicted by Hamas?
Everybody has condemned October 7th. Everybody has condemned. That does not justify going in and slaughtering innocent women and children. Absolutely nothing justifies it. And it's rich for AMOTs to talk about law and what's legal in a war. They don't respect the International Court of Justice. They have tried to undermine the UN and UNRWA. So they think that they can act whatever way they like because Israel has been allowed to act whatever way it likes. And that has to change. There has to be sanctions. There has to be consequences for any state that goes rogue. And at the moment, under Netanyahu's government, Israel has become a rogue state.
Madam President and distinguished members of the court, it is a privilege to appear before the court on behalf of South Africa. I will address Israel's genocidal intent. At this stage, the court is not required to determine that the only inference to be drawn from the available evidence is genocidal to order provisional measures, as that is to decide the merits. Rather, the assessment of the existence of an intent to destroy could be made by the court only at the stage of the examination of the merits. That some of the alleged acts may also amount to atrocities other than genocide does not exclude the finding of plausible acts of genocide. Madam President, South Africa is not alone in drawing attention to Israel's genocidal rhetoric against Palestinians in Gaza. 15 United Nations special rapporteurs and 21 members of the United Nations working groups have warned that what is happening in Gaza reflects a genocide in the making and an overt intent to destroy the Palestinian people under occupation. Israel has a genocidal intent against the Palestinians in Gaza. That is evident from the way in which Israel's military attack is being conducted, which has been described by Ms. Hassim SC. It is systematic in its character and form. The mass displacement of the population of Gaza, headed into areas where they continue to be killed, and the deliberate creation of conditions that, quote, lead to a slow death, unquote. There is also the clear pattern of conduct, the targeting of family homes and civilian infrastructure, laying waste to vast areas of Gaza, and the bombing, shelling, and sniping of men, women, and children where they stand, the destruction of the health infrastructure, and lack of access to humanitarian assistance. There are more than 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. Israel is the occupying power in control of Gaza. It controls entry, exit, and the internal movements of inside Gaza. And qua Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu exercises overall command over the Israeli Defense Force and, in turn, the Palestinians in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his address to the Israeli forces on 28 October 2023, preparing for the invasion of Gaza, urged the soldiers to remember what Amalek has done to you. This refers to the biblical command by God to Saul for the retaliatory destruction of an entire group of people known as the Amalekites, put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. The genocidal invocation to Amalek was anything but idle. It was repeated by Mr. Netanyahu in a letter to the Israeli Armed Forces on 3 November 2023. Madam President, let the Prime Minister's words speak for themselves.
Has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza. And
All right. So, if you haven't seen this, he actually does a whole presentation of all the stuff they're doing. You know, when it comes to, throwing parties, dancing around, desecrating graves, all kinds of stuff he presents to the court. And so if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's all over. It's all over social media. All right. And yeah, like we have a subject. There was a main subject of this series. So anybody trying to throw it off or so, well, doesn't these people do this? Well, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, we can address that in separate times. But the world is watching what's going on in a specific place. And if we don't, if we just turn a cheek, that may happen to you one day, like, you never know when somebody might say, well, that was easy, you know, taking over this. Nobody really stopped us. We did what we want, and what's stopping us from the rest of the world? All right. So somebody was asking, well, it's a lot of people. A lot of people, a lot of you guys, you gotta just, I know you're probably not used to it, but you gotta go back. You gotta catch up on the presentations, take the time if you're really interested, you know, check out part one. What I'm about to read to you is from part one, when we came out, and also I included this in part two. Part two is it's a lot more extensive. So check out the full videos of part one and part two. I'm just gonna read real quick an excerpt. It's from the Jewish Encyclopedia, a descriptive record of the history, religion, literature, and customs of the Jewish people from the earliest times to the present day. This is from 1901, and this is, from their scholars, their academics, this encyclopedia. Okay, so this is not nobody saying anything. This is what they have written themselves. All right, and we zoom in to this part right here. Let me get zoom in a little bit more. Sorry, guys. It won't let me. One second. It won't even let me move it. Hold on. Okay, let me zoom out again. Okay, we go. It says Chazas. Chazas. Now you can substitute that with a K. All right. Yeah, but we smart, we try to not to draw too much attention, because we want to be able to like present this, historically and with sources and with just the truth, So again, Jewish Encyclopedia tells us a people of Turkish origin whose beginnings of the history. Sorry. Okay, let me go back. A people of Turkish origin, all right? Turkish origin, whose life and history are interwoven with the very beginnings of the history of the Jews of Russia. The kingdom of the Chazars was firmly established in most of South Russia long before the foundations of the Russian monarchy by the Varangians. Jews have lived on the shores of the Black and Caspian Sea since the first centuries of the Common Era. Historical evidence points to the region of the Ural as the home of the Chazars. Among the classical writers of the Middle Ages, they were known as the Tozars, Kazirs, Akatsirs, and Akatirs, and in the Russian chronicles as Kawalises and Ugri Viali. All right, and it keeps going and going. And then, we talk about a conversion to Judaism by this whole kingdom of the Chazars and these people known as Chazars of a Turkish origin. All right, so we just saw the presentation. And what were the immigrants that were coming into Palestine? Again, Eastern Europeans, so-called, with the J word. So you put two and two together, guys. I mean, yeah. And then it gets pretty deep. All right, but thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. I'm gonna leave it right there for part 14. I got a whole lot more I can do. And I got other videos coming. I'm working on other stuff, a couple genealogies and all that. So, bear with me as I do proper investigation on certain subjects, so I don't just rush into videos. Thanks for tuning in. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.